It was a social catastrophe of monumental proportions, unfolding in pristine, high-definition live stream for thousands of viewers. In the sterile quiet of a luxury kitchen, he had just uttered the most mortifying words of his life, or perhaps any life. His voice, barely a whisper, had echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. "Mr. Matteo, your hands are incredible. Can €1 touch one?" The air instantly solidified. The man before him, Matteo, a figure carved from ice and old money, froze mid-motion. His dark eyes, which held the depth of a starless night, flickered with something unreadable, a mix of shock, disdain, and a sliver of something that might have been morbid curiosity. The live chat feed, a silent entity until now, erupted into a digital firestorm of disbelief and second-hand embarrassment. But to understand how our protagonist, Oliver, found himself in this deeply humiliating predicament, a situation that would surely become a viral meme by morning, we must rewind. We have to go back to the very beginning, to the moment his world shattered and was rebuilt in the most bizarre way imaginable. It started with a sensation of drowning, not in water, but in an endless, suffocating darkness. He felt a phantom weight pulling him down, like kelp wrapping around his limbs, dragging him into a cold, silent abyss. His head pounded, a dizzying drumbeat against his skull, and his lungs screamed for air that simply wasn't there. He was struggling, fighting against nothing, unable to draw even a single, desperate gasp. Then, a pinprick of light appeared in the oppressive black. Instinct took over. Oliver reached for it, a blind, desperate grasp for salvation, and in the next instant, he was violently sucked through it, like being pulled through the eye of a needle. He awoke with a jolt. A man was sprawled on a nearby sofa, his face obscured by glasses so thick they resembled the bottoms of wine bottles. His brows were knitted together in a troubled sleep, his cheeks flushed with a feverish warmth, and his breathing was worryingly shallow. "Oliver, are you okay?" The voice was gentle, laced with genuine concern. Oliver Eurostrade's eyes snapped open, finding himself face to face with a strikingly handsome young man, likely in his early 20s. His hazel eyes, gorgeous and expressive, were wide with worry. "Am I Euros nothing?" Oliver replied on pure reflex, the word feeling foreign on his tongue. He blinked slowly, pushing himself into a sitting position and taking in his surroundings. He was in a beautifully designed open-plan space, where a modern kitchen flowed seamlessly into a cozy living room. Sunlight streamed through massive floor-to-ceiling windows, bathing the plush, fabric sofa in a warm, golden glow. The decor was a chic take on cottagecore, creating an atmosphere that was both bright and inviting. Everything seemed perfect, idyllic even, except for one glaring, terrifying detail: the cameras. There were so many of them. He counted 2 in the kitchen, 4 in the living room, and several more mounted discreetly in the corners of the ceiling. As if that wasn't enough, 2 camera operators stood not far away, their large professional lenses pointed directly at him and the young man. A wave of vertigo washed over Oliver. Just moments ago, or what felt like moments he had been in his own cramped study, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the sheer panic of a looming deadline. He Eurostrade been hammering away at his keyboard, the glow of his computer screen the only light in the dead of night. How had he gone from that grim reality to this sun-drenched, unfamiliar house, in broad daylight, with a stranger staring at him as if they shared a deep and personal history? The handsome stranger spoke again, handing him a glass of water. "I just came down from upstairs," he explained. "I saw you lying there, completely still. You gave me the scare of my life." The man then scanned the room, his gaze hesitating near one of the cameras before he leaned in conspiratorially, his voice dropping to a near inaudible whisper. "Oliver, are you about to go into your heat phase? I noticed your face is really red." Heat phase. The words hit Oliver like a physical blow. His pupils constricted. That was a term he Eurostrade only ever encountered in one specific genre of fiction, the kind he devoured in the dark of night. Suddenly, his mind was flooded with a torrent of fragmented memories, memories that were vivid, detailed, but definitively not his own. He struggled to keep his expression neutral, a mask of calm confusion. But the fingers resting on his thighs trembled uncontrollably. After the initial shockwave of information subsided, after his brain had processed the impossible, he could no longer deny the truth. He, Oliver, had transmigrated. He had literally fallen into the world of the Omgaverse romance reality show fanfiction he had been reading just 2 days prior. And he hadn't just landed in the story, he had become a character. Specifically, he was now inhabiting the body of a nameless background Omega, and nobody whose soul-defining characteristic was being an aspiring writer of ultra-slow burn fanfiction that had 0 readership and less than 100 comments. He was a ghost in plain sight, a piece of living set decoration. In the original narrative, this writer character was utterly invisible, only ever serving to highlight the brilliance of the story's golden boy, the main Omega protagonist. When the heartthrob played a single, soul-stirring piece on the piano, this background character would be in the audience, clapping with stunned admiration. When the heartthrob created a photorealistic drawing, he would be there, marveling at the talent and applauding enthusiastically. When the heartthrober Eurostrade's singing went viral online, he would be smiling from the sidelines, clapping along. And when the heartthrob finally held hands with the main alpha, a shiver would run through the background writer, and he would clap with a quiet, reverent awe. Years later, at their wedding, he was still there, a perpetual guest, clapping as if it were a sacred duty. This character was the textbook definition of a tool, a narrative device with no agency, no story arc, and a personality as shallow as a puddle. There was never any chance of him finding a romantic partner on the show. And now, as Oliver stared at the concerned young man before him, at the dreamy, unmistakable aura of a protagonist, it hit him like a freight train. Of course he was so damn handsome. This wasn't just some random cast member. This was Theodore, the heartthrob himself, the central Omega of the entire story. Theodore watched Oliver's prolonged silence, likely assuming he was just shy or intimidated by the cameras. He leaned in again, his voice a soft reassurance. "Hey, I get it. No one can hear us. Do you want to go back to your room? You can take a break, get yourself together." Oliver gave a small, grateful nod. This was perfect. It was his chance to escape the relentless gaze of the lenses, to find a private space where he could finally process the absolute insanity of his situation, figure out the timeline of this dating show, and get a clear picture of who was currently entangled with whom. He stood up, ready to make his escape, but a sudden commotion from outside the front door stopped him in his tracks. At the sound, Theodore Eurostrade's eyes lit up, his handsome features sparkling with genuine delight. "It's Henry and Mr. Matteo." Thayer Eurostrade re-back from the grocery run. The names struck Oliver with the force of a physical impact. Henry and Matteo, the two main alphas of the original story, the hero and the tragic second lead. Oliver froze, his entire body rigid, and slowly turned his gaze toward the door. Henry, the man Theodore constantly referred to as Bro, was a top-tier alpha and the entertainment industry's latest breakout star. At just 22, he had already won an award for Best Lead Actor. In the 3 short years since his debut, he had been hailed as a generational talent, a genius on screen. He was the main alpha protagonist of the original story and the ultimate winner of this chaotic romantic competition. And then there was Matteo, the original second male lead. He was also a top-tier alpha, a man born into immense wealth, an outsider from an old money dynasty who had grown up emotionally estranged from his own family. He was now one of the most formidable names in the business world, raised without a single shred of love or approval from his parents, pushed aside by his own bloodline. He had learned to be ruthlessly self-reliant from a young age. This brutal upbringing had shaped him into a complex man. On the surface, he was kind and considerate, always looking out for the other cast members, earning their respect as a dependable big brother figure. However, the profound lack of love in his childhood had left him with a deep-seated insecurity and a paranoid personality. Beneath his warm, polite exterior lay a glacier of emotional distance that was nearly impossible to melt. It was incredibly difficult for anyone to get close to his heart, but once they did, Matteo would cling to them with a desperate, unyielding intensity. After the show ended in the original story, when Theodore inevitably chose Henry over him, Matteo had simply vanished from their lives. No contact, no farewell, just absolute silence. His philosophy was tragically simple: if he couldn't have all of you, then he would have none of you. He would rather disappear than be a ghost in the background of their happiness. In truth, his connection with Theodore in the story had been nothing more than a series of fleeting glances and quiet, unspoken moments. Readers only ever glimpsed the depth of Matteo's trade's feelings through scattered lines of text, tiny cracks in his perfectly composed facade. Perhaps he hadn't even been truly in love with Theodore. Perhaps it was just the intoxicating novelty of being seen, of receiving a small, fragile kindness from someone who offered it freely, with no strings attached. In a life defined by betrayal and strategic games, that simple warmth was the first real comfort Matteo had known in his 28 years. And yet, the one person who offered it to him never chose him in the end. His backstory had been heartbreaking for readers, and for Oliver, it had been devastating. During the show's final episode in the novel, he remembered sitting in his lonely apartment, sipping tea, cheering for the main couple while simultaneously crying his way through an entire box of tissues for Matteo. Matteo was Oliver's absolute favorite character, his most beloved, and his biggest source of emotional anguish. It wasn't Euro's trade to a random attachment. Matteo's loneliness mirrored his own. Oliver had lost both his parents at a young age and had grown up in an orphanage, where he learned the harsh realities of life all too early. Reading novels every night became his only sanctuary, his only escape. Through college, he juggled daytime studies with part-time jobs, writing his own stories late into the night, pushing himself to the brink until he finally graduated and began to see some small measure of success. But before he could even begin to enjoy it, he had died from sheer exhaustion and woken up here. Oliver let out a soft, imperceptible sigh. Still, he was the kind of person who adapted to his circumstances. And besides, in a few moments, he would be standing face to face with his favorite character from the novel. It was like preparing to meet a celebrity crush, only 1,000 times more intense and thrilling. He rubbed his hands together in nervous anticipation, waiting for Matteo to walk through that door. Ding dong. Your male second lead romance system is now online. Operator ID 188 at your service. The sudden, mechanical voice crackling inside his head nearly made Oliver jump out of his skin. Target love interest detected approaching. Host, remain still and maintain high mental focus. He should have known. He had read enough transmigration novels to know that a protagonist rarely arrived without a system of some kind. And here it was, waiting for him. Oliver took a deep, steadying breath and tried to communicate with it telepathically. So, you are Eurostrade re the a circumflex Euros male second lead romance systemer Eurostrade. And you mentioned targeting Samania Euros wait. Does that mean my mission is toward Euros date Matteo? Bingo! Not bad for a host personally selected by 188. The systemer Eurostrade's usually flat, emotionless voice suddenly adopted a bizarre, synthesized cheerfulness, complete with weird wavy inflections that sent a shiver down Oliver Eurostrade's spine. Your ultimate mission: achieve mutual selection with a male second lead, Matteo, by this end of this romance show. Mission failure will result in Euro's termination. What kind of twisted logic is that? Oliver thought, aghast. My life or death depends on whether I can successfully romance Matteo. Everyone else Eurostrade's systems were about gaining power, defeating villains, building empires, and accumulating wealth. His system was just a glorified, high-stakes dating sim with a death penalty. He stared blankly into space, speechless. He made a mental note to perform some kind of spiritual cleansing ritual if he ever survived this. The system continued its incessant chattering, and eventually Oliver pieced the full story together. It turned out that the original author, after concluding the main story, had written an extensive side story detailing the lifelong happiness of the main couple, Henry and Theodore. The fates of other cast members were mentioned briefly, but when it came to Matteo, there was nothing. Not a single word. The only clue to this fate was a single, haunting line buried deep in this original text: he never saw Theodore again. This unresolved tragedy had infuriated readers, especially those who had become deeply invested in Matteo Eurostrade's character. They flooded the comments section, pleading with the author to give Matteo the happy ending he deserved. The author ignored them and moved on to a new novel. This immense, collective reader fury from a higher dimension began to destabilize the fabric of the lower-dimensional story world. If left unchecked, this fictional universe was at risk of total collapse. This crisis caught the attention of the Novel World Administration, a celestial bureaucracy that managed such things. They assigned the male second lead romance system to stabilize this fragile world, and Operator 188 was tasked with selecting a suitable soul from the higher dimension. System detects host Eurostrade's emotional unrest regarding the male second lead is off the charts. Stands out like a beacon among all readers. No hesitation. Chosen instantly. You really are a lucky one, aren't you? The system was practically preening. Oliver gritted his teeth. Am I supposed to send it a thank you card? Host, you are Eurostrade re being too polite. I Eurostrade am the one who should feel awkward now. The system chirped, its virtual cheeks apparently blushing. But if you really want to write one, I promise I Eurostrade LL keep it safe. Oliver pressed a hand to his throbbing forehead. He spoke with dead seriousness in his mind. So, if I fail this mission, Eater Eurostrade's not just me who dies. This entire world collapses, and everyone in it disappears. System exactly. So you are Euros Trade D, better pull your weight and get cracking on these tasks. Oh, and upon successful completion, the system will reward you accordingly. What kind of reward? Oliver Euros Trade's interest was piqued. This had to be the golden ticket, the cheat code. Think flawless skin that drives every alpha wild, a perfectly sculpted figure, rosy little lips like ripe cherries, silky smooth hair. You know the drill. Euros, stop. Just a Euros, shut up. Let me breathe for a second. Good grief. Oliver had been fighting a desperate battle to keep his face a neutral mask in front of the cameras. He thanked whatever gods existed for the thick sunglasses he was wearing. They provided just enough cover. In the few minutes between his arrival in this world and the systemer Euros Trade's appearance, he had already formulated a plan. His original intention was to quietly maintain the persona of an extra. He would first get used to the daily life of an Omega, then become a dedicated cheerleader for the show Euros Trade's actual romances, enjoying a front row seat to the drama. After the show wrapped, he would start a new, quiet life. But now, he wasn't a Euros Trade T even allowed to be a lazy spectator. He had to actively pursue someone in a high-profile, live-streamed dating show, and not just anyone. He had to pursue the enigmatic, untouchable mystery man known as the second lead. The truth was, in his entire previous life, Oliver had never even held another person a Euros Trade's hand. His entire being radiated an aura of pure, innocent virginity. He had absolutely no idea how to flirt, and honestly, while he felt immense sympathy for Mateo as a reader, he wasn't romantically attracted to him. To suddenly be asked to transform that readily pity into genuine romance felt impossible. If he weren't our Euros Trade T on camera, Oliver would have already bolted back to his assigned room and burrowed under the covers like a terrified animal, hiding from this new, horrifying reality. The footsteps outside grew louder, and then two towering figures stepped into the villa. The first man exuded an aura of crystalline ice. He had thick brows, sharp eyes, and was dressed in a crisp, light gray casual suit. A subtle silver ring glinted on his finger. His expression was cold, devoid of a smile, and he offered only the barest of nods to the people in the room. He was pure, intimidating alpha energy. This was Henry, without a doubt. He was the classic, perfect male lead who would only ever bend the knee for one person. He was, objectively, every other Euros Trade's dream. But Oliver had never been into the cold, distant type. He preferred someone calm, courteous, and politely reserved. Someone like Euros well, someone like the second lead. Oliver grabbed the glass of water Theodore had given him and took a long, sharp gulp, trying to steady his nerves for the arrival of his mission target. And then he saw him. Walking in slowly behind Henry, carrying a shopping bag, was another top-tier alpha. The man was tall, easily over 190 centimeters, with broad shoulders and a narrow waist, clad in a dark trench coat and black trousers that created an impossibly perfect silhouette. His features were a stunning paradox of sharp and delicate. His eyebrows were like elegant brushstrokes, his long lashes like crow feathers, and his skin was smooth with a quiet luminescence of fine jade. But the high bridge of his nose and the stern, defined line of his jaw added a subtle hardness that balanced the softness, giving him an air that shifted between refined elegance and cold intensity. There was an unreadable depth beneath his calm surface. His gaze was lowered, his eyes deep and quiet, and his mouth was curved in a slight smile that never quite reached them. The long, elegant fingers holding the shopping bag were deceptively understated, but on his wrist sat a watch worth more than a downtown apartment. Euros a Patek Philippe reference 6300G. He didn't need to say a word. The price tag did all the talking. Oliver, however, had no idea what the watch was. He wasn't paying attention to accessories at all. His entire focus, his entire world, had locked onto Matteo Eurostrade's face. He was utterly unable to look away. His mind was buzzing with a singular, frantic thought, screaming on a loop. "Sir, I am so ready." He had imagined Matteo from the novel, of course, but no mental image could have prepared him for the reality of this man standing right in front of him in flesh and blood. The real-life version blew his imagination completely out of the water. Matteo was unreal. The face, the frame, the aura, Euros, everything was exactly the type Oliver had always been drawn to in stories. That intoxicating blend of quiet charm and dangerous depth. And now, it was standing just inches away, breathing the same air. Oliver stared, completely transfixed, like a deer caught in the brightest of headlights. He nearly choked on his water, forgetting to swallow, and ended up inhaling it, sputtering in two quick, desperate coughs. His skin was naturally pale, so even a small fit of coughing was enough to make the corners of his eyes glisten with moisture and a deep flush to spread across his cheeks. This new Omega body was still a foreign vessel, and his face was already tinged pink from his earlier disorientation. As he coughed, a small trickle of water he Eurostrade just swallowed escaped the corner of his lip. Mortified, Oliver felt the dampness and quickly wiped it away with the back of his hand. "Oh God, this is a disaster. What kind of first impression was this?" He should have just skipped the water. He wanted to evaporate on the spot, the heat of his embarrassment flooding up from his neck into his face. To everyone else in the room, the scene was Euros peculiar. An Omega wearing thick-framed glasses that covered half his face had been staring at Matteo for an uncomfortably long time, then discreetly cleared his throat, his face turning pinker by the second, as a suspicious droplet of what looked like drool slipped from his mouth before he furtively wiped it away. For a single, excruciating heartbeat, the air in the room seemed to freeze. Matteo raised a single, perfect eyebrow, his gaze catching the under Eurostrade's flushed face and the guilty way he wiped at his mouth. What in the world was this Guru Eurostrade's deal? As a top-tier alpha, Matteo was accustomed to being stared at. It was routine. But he had never before witnessed an Omega practically drool over him in real time. If this was some new, bizarre tactic to capture an alpha Eurostrade's attention, well, congratulations. It had certainly worked. The strange little stunt had left an impression. Matteo took a slow, thorough look at this Omega. The thick frames obscured half his face, and his head was slightly bowed, making it hard to see his eyes. His skin was pale, like someone who rarely saw the sun. The lips he had just wiped still glistened faintly. He had a sharp jawline, and his dark hair was swept back in a messy knot. His thin frame was lost in an oversized white shirt that looked like it might float away in a breeze. All things considered, compared to the other Omegas, he was Euros utterly unremarkable. Matteo racked his brain. What was his name again? He Eurostrade skimmed the guest list. He remembered something about a last name Euros Jang. Matteo prided himself on his memory, but this Omega had been so unassuming, so utterly forgettable, that his name had simply slipped through the cracks. Theodore, sensing the awkward tension, quickly jumped in to change the subject. "Henry, you're a lifesaver, and Mr. Matteo, thank you for the shopping. Where are Lucas and William? Didn't they come back with you? Henry just shrugged. They wanted to pick up some flowers to decorate the cabin. Oliver had been stewing in his own social failure, but the mention of Lucas and William snapped his focus back instantly. All thoughts of self-flagellation vanished. Lucas and William were the Shower Eurostrade S2 beaters. Lucas, 27, was a renowned music video director who worked with major pop groups. He was mature, calm, and caring. Like Matteo, he knew how to look after people, but while Eurostrade's kindness was hidden behind polite formality, Lucas treated everyone with genuine, brotherly affection. William, 25, was a variety show star known for his blunt honesty and unintentional comedy. These guests were all top-tier talents. Compared to them, Oliver, an unknown indie writer, felt like a seat filler. This was the 5th season of Love Letter, a long-running live-stream dating show. Each season featured 4 alphas, 2 beaters, and 2 omegas, and was famous for its inclusive format that supported all pairings. But to keep things fresh for this celebrity season, the producers had brought in huge names from entertainment, business, and even sports. Besides Henry and Matteo, the other 2 alphas were Levi, a globally renowned fashion designer, and Sebastian, a rookie Formula 1 champion. Oliver had no clue how his original body had landed a spot among such titans, chalking it up to some mysterious system magic or the director being completely blind. Unbeknownst to him, in a nearby production van, director Benjamin was staring at a close-up of Oliver on a monitor, a faint smirk on his face. "You don't get it," he told his skeptical producer, Daniel. "This one are euros, this one is the secret weapon I planted for our show. Just you wait until you see what our Eurostrade's under those glasses." Back in the villa, Oliver Eurostrade's internal crisis was interrupted by the Systema Eurostrade's chipper voice. "Congrats, host! Your Eurostrade V just completed your first task, getting the second leader Eurostrade's attention. Reward is now active. Check it soon." Before Oliver could even process that, it continued. "New mission activated. Make physical contact with the second lead within the next hour." Oliver was certain he had misheard. He had just met the man, and their first interaction was a social train wreck. The system expected him to initiate physical contact now. He Eurostrade be seen as a complete lunatic. After a beat, he sighed. If the system was going to be this unreliable, he Eurostrade just have to improvise. "So, any part of the body is fine for contact?" he asked. "System, given that you have only just met your target, the difficulty has been temporarily lowered. No restrictions for now." Oliver let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He glanced over at the group. Henry and Theodore were sorting supplies in a corner, while Matteo had moved into the kitchen to put away the groceries. This was his chance. If he waited until everyone went to their rooms for a nap, the mission would expire. He bit his lip and forced his feet to move, stepping up beside Matteo in the kitchen. "Mr. Matteo, let me help you with that." Matteo paused, his sharp, assessing eyes flicking up to meet Oliver Eurostrade's. After a moment, he murmured, "Sure, thanks. No trouble at all," Oliver said quickly. "You two did all the hard work. This is the least I can do." He could read the unspoken thought in Matteo's eyes perfectly. So this one actually does have a thing for me. Oliver couldn't exactly deny it, but he couldn't explain the life or death stakes either. And the truth was, the man was flawless, a living embodiment of his ideal type. He just had to keep his composure. They worked side by side, sorting ingredients into the fridge. They were standing close, but a careful, polite distance remained between them. There was no way for Oliver to make contact without it being glaringly obvious. He needed to be proactive. Slowly, deliberately, Oliver edged a little closer to Mater Eurostrade's side. He saw Matteo's movements still almost imperceptibly, his gaze growing deeper, darker as he glanced at him from the corner of his eye. Only his hands were exposed. Right, Oliver thought touching his hand would be the easiest way to do this. He cleared his throat softly, his eyes fixed on the Mater Eurostrade's hands. They were long and clean, with faint veins tracing paths beneath pale skin. The bone structure was sharp and powerful. That platinum watch gleamed coldly on his wrist. Oliver had planned to use the watch as an excuse to compliment it and casually touch his hand. But as he stared, the words that came out of his mouth were not the ones he had planned. "Mr. Matteo, your hands are incredible. Can I Euros touch one?" The moment the words were out, Matteo froze. His hands stopped moving. His eyes went dark as ink, but deep within them, a flicker of genuine shock shimmered. And that's when the live chat exploded. "What the hell is this guy in glasses saying? Is this harassment? Poor Mr. Matteo, getting targeted by some creepy weirdo on day one." Oliver Eurostrade's mind went blank with horror. Social death was a bottomless pit. "No," he blurted out, his voice shrinking with every word. "I meant your watch. Your watch is amazing." It was a total slip of the tongue. He stared at Matteo's unreadable expression, not even believing his own flimsy excuse. Matteo pressed his lips together, silent for a long moment. Then, the corner of his mouth lifted into a faint, mocking smile that held no amusement at all. He extended his hand toward Oliver. "Go on, touch it." Oliver hadn't expected him to agree. Frozen by hesitation, he forced himself to move, slowly extending his own hand. His fingers, pale and delicate, looked impossibly fragile next to Matteo's large palm. He lowered his gaze, watching as he tentatively brushed his fingertips against the cold metal of the watch. The touch was brief, a long fingertip grazing the watch face, skimming over the skin of his wrist for a fraction of a second before he snatched his hand back as if he Eurostrade been burned. The approach had been clumsy, awkward, and deeply strange. "Thanks, Mr. Matteo," Oliver mumbled, pulling back completely. "I swear, I just thought it was a gorgeous watch. Nothing else." Matteo still wore that hollow half-smile. Was all he said, turning to shove the last of the groceries into the fridge. Oliver knew instantly he Eurostrade been seen through completely. He couldn't stay there a second longer. He drifted out of the kitchen in a daze and, following the foreign memories in his head, found his assigned room on the second floor. The second he shut the door, Oliver collapsed onto the bed, burying his face in a pillow, utterly drained. But the system was relentless. "Congratulations, host! Second task completed. Reward granted alongside first task reward." "Thanks a lot," Oliver groaned into the pillow. "Your Eurostrade welcome," the system chirped. "It is my job to help you complete tasks efficiently and get closer to the second lead faster." Oliver's head throbbed. What kind of meticulously calculated mission was that? It felt less like the fastest way to close a gap and more like the fastest way to get a restraining order. Giving up on rest, he dragged himself out of bed to see what bizarre rewards he Eurostrade earned. He walked into the ensuite bathroom and finally got a good, hard look at his new face in the mirror. He stared, horrified, at the mess before him. The hideous glasses, the messy hair, the baggy shirt. Was that really the person who had just committed social suicide downstairs? With trembling hands, Oliver slowly took off the glasses, bracing himself for the worst. But when the thick frames were gone, he stared into the mirror and froze. The image reflected back at him looked like an entirely different person. The lower half of his face was the Sanner Euro's pale skin, sharp jawliner Euros, but his eyes, once hidden, were now fully revealed. They were perfectly almond-shaped and impossibly clear, framed by long, lush lashes. The irises were a warm amber, glistening with a soft, dewy sheen. When they looked back at him, they seemed to flicker subtly, like distant stars dancing in a night sky, dreamlike and mesmerizing. To be held in that gaze felt like you could lose your very soul. Did I ever look at people like that before? He muttered aloud. He frowned, trying to make an angry face, but in the reflection, the young Marner Eurostrade's frown just looked like a coquettish pout. And then he understood. System, Donna Eurostrade T, tell me this is the reward. Host has found it. First mission reward, a gaze so intense even dogs fall in love. No wonder his expressions felt so strange. He tried looking sad, frustrated, jealous of Euros, but no matter how he contorted his face, his eyes remained soft and dewy, constantly emitting a low-level seductive charge. After a long, stunned silence, Oliver wordlessly put the glasses back on. Water Eurostrade's the second reward. Please, host, untie your hair and claim the second reward of perfect, black, long, straight hair quality. Other transmigration protagonists got legendary skills or infinite storage spaces. He got Euro's aesthetic upgrades, but he was already getting used to this system's absurdity. He undid the messy ponytail, and his dark hair cascaded down his back, falling all the way to his waist like a sheet of fine, black silk. Surprised, he lifted a lock, feeling it slide effortlessly and coolly through his fingers. It felt amazing. He had survived his first day, barely. He had made a disastrous first impression on his target, been saddled with a life-or-death mission by a lunatic AI, and been gifted with a pair of ridiculously enchanting eyes and fairy-tale hair. He was in way over his head, and this was only the beginning. The end of the first day was just a prelude to the chaos that was to come. With a new face hidden behind old glasses and a mission that felt more like a curse than a quest, Oliver was now a player in a game he never asked to join. The cameras were always watching, his target was seemingly untouchable, and his only ally was a cheerfully homicidal system. His quiet life was over, replaced by a high-stakes, live-streamed performance where one wrong move could mean the end of everything. What do you think of Oliver's new gifts? Will his enchanting gaze and perfect hair actually help him win over the icy Mateo, or will they just lead to more hilariously awkward disasters? Let me know your theories in the comments down below, and if you're dying to see what happens next in this chaotic romance, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more. You won't want to miss the next chapter.